Is Chromatic Lantern bad?
I'm your host, Joe Cherries.
I'm your host, Beezy, joined by Ember, and that makes us the Nitpicking Nerds. Very fond people when it comes to, very fond of spending money, I would say. And one of the things I really enjoy doing is bathing. I like to smell good and to be clean with no crud on my body. Patreon is a great way to let us do that. It gives us money directly from you. Very generous of you. You get a perk in response in turn, and we get to take showers.
Yes, because we will use that money to pay our water bill. So thank you.
There's nothing more dangerous than a Magic player who has not showered.
Yes, and everybody has experienced this. If you would like to help make sure your local game stores are a little bit cleaner, please donate to our Patreon. One of our patrons who has done that is Nate Finch. Thank you so much, Nate Finch. We appreciate your support a ton. This channel, now powered by, sponsored by, brought to you by, partnered with, all of that stuff. Cool Stuff Inc. I know you're thinking, what? This is new? And yes, it is brand new. Cool Stuff Inc. has all the sealed product. They have all the singles that you need. Go there, buy them, and guess what?
Buy Cool Stuff Inc. Buy them.
Buy the singles. Buy the sealed product and use code NERDS. Nerds. That's pretty simple. Nerds. You can't forget that when checking out for 5% off your order and to show support for the Nitpicking Nerds. Because not only do you get 5% off, but they see that you use that code and they know we sent you.
Before it was like, I could buy cards with redacted link and support the nerds at the same time, but now you get to support yourself as well by saving actual dollars.
Yes. So, also sponsored by Dragon Shields. They have the best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
And like we say every video, every one of our decks is sleeved up in Dragon Shield. It's been that way for 10 plus years. Every time we've used another sleeve, we threw up. Physically made us ill. It's terrible. Use Dragon Shield. Stay healthy.
And then we had to shower with Patreon money.
Exactly. It was ridiculous.
It all comes together.
It literally all comes together. And happy birthday to everyone whose birthday is today. And before we begin, I'm going to suggest checking out the very awesome channel, Concept and Legends, for another great comedy video. Very hilarious. The Tinfoil Hat Files, all about Eldrazophobia.
If you're feeling a little bit conspiratory, I think maybe in for a little conspiracy theory action, or you're thinking, I think this March of the Machine story is going to take a hard left turn very soon. Alper might have all the details you need.
Yes, and there's some awesome stuff in here. One of my absolute favorite parts of this whole thing is the puppetry work of the little tiny Fibblethip. He's just out there like, wee!
You'll just have to see what that even means.
Check it out using the link in the description below. Beezy, start off the video.
There's been a lot of discussion about Chromatic Lantern, mostly on Twitter, so you probably don't know about it, but we're going to be talking about Chromatic Lantern. It's a card we've been pretty vocal about. It's probably one of the cards we've talked about the most on the channel. But there's this big discussion going around of like, is Chromatic Lantern bad? Or is it like totally playable? There's people on both sides. So after a quick disclaimer, we're going to go over basically most of the arguments we heard and then our take on it.
Yes, and I want to say where this comes from. Where did this conversation even start? Well, it all started with Ren and Realmbreaker. Ren and Realmbreaker has the line of text. Its static ability is that all of your lands tap for any color mana. This is what Chromatic Lantern does. This is the function. This is the whole heart of this discussion. They both have the same ability. So when people are posting like me on Twitter saying, I think Ren is not a very good card, the heart of it came down to how much did I value that line of text?
Chromatic Lantern.
The Chromatic Lantern text. So we're talking about Chromatic Lantern. Disclaimer, Commander is a game for fun. Obvious. And Amber had to leave the room because she hates fun. She's a 12-land stacks player. No fun at all. Disclaimer, super important. Commander is a game where fun comes first. You should play any card that you like, that you think is good, even if you disagree with us. Because guess what? We're going to be talking about Chromatic Lantern, and we're probably not going to be the nicest about it. We're going to tell you our opinions on it. They're mostly negative. So if you, at the end of the video you go, I think they were wrong. Guess what? Put the card in your deck. Who the heck cares what two nerds on the internet had to say about it? It just doesn't matter. It's my job to evaluate Magic cards, and guess what? I'm about to do it.
Yeah, we're going to evaluate Magic cards. We're not going to be ashamed of doing it, and it's not objective, so we're just going to tell you what we think, and if you agree with us, great.
Yes, and if you disagree with us, also great. That's actually just as valid as agreeing with us, believe it or not.
Right, this video doesn't need to have some kind of life-changing effect on you.
Yes, and our opinions are not objective. They are not fact, period. That's all you need to know. You need to know this video is an opinion piece.
So we're talking about Chromatic Lantern, so we got to read Chromatic Lantern, which does not take long. It's a 3-mana artifact. It says, lands you control have, quote, tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, and it taps for 1 mana of any color. So at its core, we have a 3-mana rock. This is a manolith. It taps for any color, and it gives you the bonus static of your lands now making rainbow mana. So there's a lot of like arguments in favor of why to play Chromatic Lantern. So we're going to just start one by one addressing them.
Yes. So let's start with the first one, and that is perfect mana fixing. And this is a truth. Like when you play Chromatic Lantern, you don't have to worry about pips anymore. You don't. You can just tap your mana, whatever land you want. As long as you tap one, it taps for whatever color you need it to be. This is very true. But if you have a good mana base, you don't really need Chromatic Lantern to bail you out. It comes to this weird like spot where Chromatic Lantern is there and does its thing, but every single turn that it is not used to get a pip that you couldn't have got otherwise, it is manalith. And when you draw the comparison, nobody in their right mind, not a single person playing Commander is telling you play manalith. That's not something that's going on. That's not something that any player is going to do on almost any level. Like maybe in your 1 cent budget where every card is 1 cent, maybe manalith is playable. It might even be too expensive for that.
Maybe. I think it's weird because if I ask you how you build a mana base, I think most people would answer generally the same way. I want to build a mana base so that I can cast all my spells at any given moment and never be wanting colors that I don't have or be mana screwed. So it almost feels like, we'll get to budget later, but this almost feels like a budget-free problem of no matter what you're going to spend on your deck, you want to make sure you have X lands that produce XYZ mana and that they all overlap in such a way that you're going to generally be able to cast all your spells regardless of whether you have Chromatic Lantern, which is one card in your deck, and I just get like really confused.
Yeah, I agree with you completely on that. It's like, I just don't think it's a bailout that people feel it is. Even if, let's just say that you're stuck in a spot where you're playing your Trade Binder deck. Well, that is a lot of people. Like, that is a thing that exists. You're building a Trade Binder deck, and now you only play basics because that's what you have, right? But you have a Chromatic Lantern, and you throw it in your deck. That's fine and dandy, and it does kind of fit in that deck. But you have to realize it's not going to bail you out of all the situations that your bad mana base is going to put you in.
Yeah, whenever you don't draw it, you got 4 plains and an island, and you don't have a swamp.
Exactly, and that's going to happen a lot. So even though it can be this perfect mana fixing thing that does happen sometimes, it still can't be promised to be drawn and bail you out of said situations.
It's not your companion. It's a card in your deck.
Exactly. It is a card in your deck. I really think that the best exercise going forward that I think everyone should do, when you play Chromatic Lantern, I want you to look. I want you to make, whenever you finish a turn, pass the turn, let your opponents do what they're doing. Check if you needed those pips. Did Chromatic Lantern make the difference in the pips you needed? If the answer is yes, Chromatic Lantern is actually fulfilling a need that your deck wants. That is actually useful. But I feel, more often than not, probably I would estimate 9 out of 10 times, after you finish a turn with Chromatic Lantern and pass, when you look at your pips, you are more likely fine. And that said, when that's happening, that is Manalith, and that is the card we're not playing.
The next point in favor of Chromatic Lantern is that it's good for budget decks, and I have to answer that question by saying, what is a budget deck? What is your budget? Chromatic Lantern, as you may or may not know, is about $4. You can get the cheapest copy for about $4, and then it ranges all the way up to maybe like $5, depending on what set it is. So like, let's say $4. Let's choose the cheapest version. I've built budget decks that I will say are definite budget decks. I have a $20 budget deck that I could never hope to ever fit Chromatic Lantern in because it's $4. That's a fifth of your budget. So I can't play it there. I have a $50 deck where a $4 card still too expensive. It's still too much of my budget to justify spending one card that doesn't like do a wombo combo, or it's really just, mana fixing. So then now we're up to what? Let's say I'm building a $100 deck. How bad is my mana base? I mean, I'm putting money into my mana base no matter what my budget is. So I'm going to be able to cast my spells. And then the more money you put into your deck, the less budget it is, but you're still on a budget, the less you need Chromatic Lantern because you could just cast your spells. So once we're up to like $200 to me, it feels like it's just trivial and I just don't need it because I'm starting to play like untapped dual lands and stuff at that point. So I don't understand where it fits in. Like when people say it's good in budget decks, just let me play budget, or someone said we were budget shaming. Where does it go?
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about this card too. I feel like maybe there is some point on the budget scale. Like, I'm not going to tell you there's not. Well, there's some place like maybe it's between like 150 and like 250. But I feel like it's this niche like spot to be in. Now, where it has to apply in budget is we're talking about kind of like trade binders, and it's tough to ever address the trade binder deck, right? Because everybody's situation is completely different.
But Joe, Chromatic Lantern is playable because I only own 99 Magic cards and I have to build a playable Commander deck. You fool.
And like,
of course.
And like that's an extreme, right? Like BZ's taking it to the absolute logical extreme. But yes, we can draw that extreme back. The fact of the matter is, let's just say you own like 1,000 card collection and you really, maybe you spend like $50 on Magic cards a week, but Chromatic Lantern's in your collection. Sure, I understand it is going to be good in your deck under the circumstances given, but it's impossibly hard for us to ever look at everyone's individual situation. Everybody has a different financial situation, how they play Magic, how much they put into Magic, and it's tough to address that. It's not something it's something we cannot address. It is impossible to address.
Yeah, it almost feels dishonest to even mention that. Like, it's just a distraction. Like, we could never possibly examine every single person's trade binder and how their deck should be built. So, like, trade binder decks are kind of their own thing. That is just a kind of a waste of time to talk about when I'm evaluating Chromatic Lantern and is it good. We can talk about it in non-budget, which we did. We can talk about it in budget, which we did. And then we can kind of keep talking. But as far as trade binder decks goes, play whatever you have. It's better to play Magic than not play Magic.
I think the thing to say is there are plenty of people in a situation where they have certain cards or specific situations where buying or playing the Chromatic Lantern they have is the right choice. It is hard to see those situations, and we're talking about this more from the broad perspectives of, hey, so when we look at a budget, when we're talking about budget, we're talking about, hey, we're going to spend $100 in a deck. Or, hey, we're going to, maybe we have $50, we're going to spend $50 on a deck. That's the way we're looking at it, not as, hey, what is your specific like financial situation and how...
Hey, I started playing in Return to Ravnica, and then I took a break between Ravnica Allegiance and War of the Spark, but now I'm playing again, and it's like I have these cards. Like, I don't know.
Exactly. We all have unique situations and circumstances for how we play Magic, and I'm breaking this down to Magic because we can go way deeper on how life is very different for every single human. But we all have different circumstances. It's tough to address each different circumstance, and all we can look at is budget, non-budget, and everything in between that. We can't create the world of the trade binder and look at it. Like, if you showed me your collection and I could see it, I could tell you if it was good in the deck or not, but I can't look at every one of those situations. It would take me literally years.
Next, it quote-unquote makes gameplay easier. We mentioned you can kind of just shut your brain off, for lack of a better term, and just tap all your mana as though all your spells cost colorless to cast because you don't have any problems with producing any different kinds of colors. I would only say kind of to this. Like, it's not even 100% true. If you value that ability highly, by all means, play it. I don't value it highly as most people probably. Joe probably also doesn't. We know people tend to not play Prismatic Omen, I think it's called, or Joiner Adept that don't tap for mana but have that same ability of Rainbow Lands. Like, it seems like people don't value it that highly. And we'll get to, like, opportunity costs later. So I'm a little confused right now, but as far as like just kind of tapping lands for whatever, not really. What if you have like an instant in your hand that costs like red, blue, black? Well, you have to make sure you hold up red, blue, black, because if Chromatic Lantern gets destroyed, you just can't cast your spell.
This is also kind of one that we could never argue with. If you feel like you love turning off your brain when you have Chromatic Lantern out, then play it. That's all you can really say about that, right?
Maybe it'll make playing easier for you. Like, maybe you play better because you don't have to worry about tapping your mana.
And that's fair, legitimate, and it's not something I could ever argue against.
It's like, how could it ever be relevant in the discussion of, is Chromatic Lantern generally good? It's like, it's a special scenario for you. I would love for you to play Magic to the best of your, ability and so that you have the most fun. But, like, what does this have to do with, is Chromatic Lantern generally good?
Yeah. I mean, something similar to this is like, we have a friend, a Cathar Crusade. It's a very good Magic card, period. It's extremely good. Like, there's no arguing it. But he doesn't play it in decks. But it doesn't change the fact that it's good. And the reason he doesn't play it in decks is he hates keeping track of the dice.
It's annoying accounting to do.
It is.
But you cannot want to play it and still have it be good. And you can want to play Chromatic Lantern and still have it be generally bad.
Yes, that's exactly my point here.
All right, I think this is going to be the most important one. This is kind of, I think, where the whole thing comes to a head. It's 3-mana rocks are okay. So when we say that we don't think Chromatic Lantern is very good, which we kind of just said right now, we don't think it's very good, and I can't even think of a time where I've ever played it, in 5-color decks or otherwise. So, is a 3-mana rock okay? I would say that in general, a 3-mana rock, our opinion on it is that it's extremely mediocre, and I would need some upside on it, some like substantial upside, like it taps for 2 mana, or it can like copy a spell or something later in the game. And I just wouldn't play Manolith really ever, not because I'm thinking like, oh, you just can't play that card just because it's not up to the card quality I'd want.
Exactly. Yeah. We feel that the card quality on a budget, off a budget, everything in between a budget is not there. You don't want to be playing 3-mana rocks. There are very few that we ever suggest in this channel. When we sit down and we build decks, we don't put in many 3-mana rocks. You're going to see some things, maybe a Cursed Mirror with some combos sneaking into decks. Maybe
the Coalition Relic.
Look, maybe the Coalition Relic and maybe Midnight Clock. These are exceptions, though, and they seem to do a lot more than you're going to see from Chromatic Lantern, in our opinion. And obviously, this is incredibly subjective, but we are looking at it from the point of 2-mana rocks are greatly better than 3-mana rocks. And there is a difference. Like, I don't think any Magic player is going to sit there and tell me that Chromatic Lantern being 2-mana versus 3-mana is not a huge difference.
Yeah, so we evaluated. We were like, well, how valuable is the utility land tap for any color? And we were like, take it or leave it. But if you make Chromatic Lantern a 2-mana rock, the opportunity cost to put in your deck, from our point of view, goes from I have to play a quote-unquote bad card to get a mana fixing ability I'm not really interested in, to I'm going to play this card anyway because it's a 2-mana rock that makes any color. So it's already up there with Arcane Signet, and then there's just more words on it, and I could almost care less what they are.
Exactly.
So it like changes the opportunity cost like unbelievably to where it's like, I don't want to play this to start. And this to, I want to play it to start. What else does it say? I don't really care.
So I think the core disagreement comes down to this. It really comes down to, should you play 3-mana rocks? It's a great question. It really is an interesting question. And ultimately, we come to the point of you probably should play very few 3-mana rocks. So
yeah, I would say in general, a rock that only taps for 1 mana and costs 3, I would never play it. If there's cards that add synergy and stuff, it's a case-by-case basis. But in general, Manolith, I don't think anyone is even agreeing that card is playable.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a huge difference between 2 and 3 mana, the difference between double spelling on turns, the difference between being able to cast it in certain situations. There's just a lot that makes this factor so important. I would argue that the most important thing to determining the power level of a card is its mana value, because the simple fact of the matter is, look at something like Divination. Divination, everyone will look at that card and say, that's crap. That's not a card we're playing in Commander. It is bad. It is not up to the standards of the Commander format. But if it costs 1 mana, the card's insane now.
Yeah, it's playable everywhere.
It's the exact same card. It's still called Divination, but it only costs 1 blue. And that's exactly it. And that's where the big disagreement seems to come in. Should you be playing this 3-mana rock? We think 3-mana rocks are incredibly mediocre, so that line of text, just not worth it. It's not pushing it over the top to that point in our perspective.
Yeah, so I guess if you want some homework, which is how every Magic video you want to end, I'm sure, with homework, check when you have Chromatic Lantern out, see how relevant the mana is. How many colors are you getting that you didn't previously have access to? And I don't know if we had to say this, but obviously the exceptions where you're playing like centriplets, we're not talking about that. We have to talk about in general, because if I sit here and go over every specific deck that you have that I haven't listed, the video is going to be 3 hours long. So, in general, does Chromatic Lantern actually give you the colors that you need every time? How often do you have to hold up an instant and kind of negate some of the free thinking value on it? And just, would you play this if it costed 4? Would you be just as jazzed as us if it costed 2? How much do you care about the last ability? Just kind of like, reevaluate it.
Yeah, exactly. And you can come to the same conclusion you're at now, or you can change your opinion.
Yeah.
It's perfectly fine. You can still think, no, you're wrong. This is the best 3-mana rock. That's a fair takeaway. You're allowed to think that. And what makes it better is if you watch this whole video and got to the end and you still are thinking the same thing, or if you change your opinion, both are equally valid.
Does somebody have to be wrong? Does somebody have to lose here? Can we just say that we don't like playing it and we wouldn't recommend playing it if you're trying to power up your deck?
I also think good on you if you completely disagreed with us this whole time and stuck with the video, because listening to the dissenting opinions is very helpful. Even on a small scale like Magic the Gathering
and Chromatic Lantern,
it's in Chromatic Lantern. It is. Yeah, it's even smaller. It's like the Magic the Gathering, and then how about this one card from
like
the game?
2012.
No, this one card in the game, in this specific format, in the game. Like, the most hyper-specific you can get down. But this is actually, listening to dissenting opinions is a great life skill to have and helps you learn. So, let's decide on this. And
go on learning over here. This is a video that'll help you learn something.
Yeah, fallacies. Peace out, Tribe Scouts.